Hi, welcome to Speak of the Devil presents Third Side Intelligence. My name is Reverend Campbell, and we have a fantastic show for you this week. But first, let me talk to you guys a little bit about stuff going on here. I don't understand what the hell is happening. Just when you thought the doofus-in-chief couldn't get any worse, he doubles down. Now this dictator in the making wants a military parade. America's had one, and it's all over the world, and it's every single day. The last military parade cost $12 million. And if you think that's a lot, you don't know that Don Drumpf is going to be up in the ante a bit. He's not going to want to have been outdued by the past, which brings me to the most relevant point that I want to bring up today. And it's nothing new, and it's on both sides, but I'm focusing today on the Republicans. Republicans are fucking liars. They pretend to be deficit hawks when Dems are in office, but as soon as they get in power, it's spend, spend, spend. They complain about Obama's deficits and then add to it with Trump's, all the while cutting taxes, widening the disparity of money coming into the government versus money going out of the government. You know, the basics of balancing a budget. But that's not all. As Republicans faint at the boob grab gag of Al Franken, leading to his resignation, they stand proudly behind an admitted sexual predator themselves, the commander-in-chief. Roy Moore almost won Alabama's nomination, and he was an alleged child predator. Rob Porter was just resigned over domestic violence allegations this past week, and it's okay, you must understand, as a Republican, to beat your wife. You're going to even get support from the president, and until the public finds out, then there's a problem. Not much of one. You're going to have to resign, but they're still going to champion you as a good guy. The only thing that I believe Republicans are honest about is being anti-intellectual. Well, you all have shown yourselves there, proven it up and down. Point in fact, the historical record shows from economic growth and job creation to stock market performance and just about every other indicator of health in American capitalism, the modern U.S. economy has almost always done better under Democratic presidents, despite GOP mythology to the contrary. America generally gained more jobs and grew faster when taxes were higher, even much higher, and income inequality lower. But this is only according to the U.S. Department of Labor, Bloomberg News, New York Times, Washington Post reporting, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. You know, reality. If you want to know the truth about fake news, it's been the Republican mythology that they are good for the economy or business, that they have any semblance of moral authority or concern about America or Americans. They bow to their corporate masters, stripping away consumer protections in the name of deregulation, with the record high 40.8% of Americans who approve of Trump and his agenda, all the while suffering from it, as good sheep do. Just make sure you lean a little farther into that fence so he can get a good grip on you as he fucks you from behind. Oh, and remember to scream MAGA, so he can stay hard. Now, the only way this fool can perpetuate his disastrous agenda is to continue reinforcing the false narrative that everything is the extreme. A belief I see perpetuated by Satanists and non-Satanists alike. If you dislike racists, you're Antifa. If you dislike liberal activism, you're the alt-right. And while you're arguing your points, these extremes are taking control of the political movements and twisting the attention behind them, stifling free speech and demonizing normality. We must move past these false narratives and stop getting our news from social media. There are actual real news outlets out there that report facts, actual unbiased facts. Imagine that. If you just stop arguing meaningless posts online and read, you can find them too and be informed. When we say study, not worship, it's not just about Satanism. Now, seeing as we live in a world of extremes, mired in half-truths and misrepresentations, let's attempt to clarify at least a few things here tonight. For generations, conflicting studies have been funded and released by special interests about food, nutrition, health, and fitness. As human beings trapped in the web of magazine cover fashion, we believe everything must be the extreme of modern physical beauty and fitness, or else. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing nutrition and fitness with two women who practice what they preach, and we will be sharing our own stories and examples. Now, our first guest. Which Jessie Twain. She is a contributor to 9 Cents. She currently co-hosts The Witching Hour on Third Side Network and writes and voice acts for the Satanic Players Society. While she's never been a gym rat or a health nut per se, Jessie has long held a fascination with the nuances of diet and exercise. Hers has been an approach of minimal effort, maximum impact. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for sitting through my diatribe. Our next guest is a Church Satan member and Scotch-dependent life form, Jenni. She started 5 years ago at almost 600 pounds and utilized Mark Ripto's starting strength program to lose 260 pounds to date, and gaining the strength to compete at this year's Southern Elite Classic at age 42 with lifts totaling 631 pounds. Jenni wants to see everyone reap the benefits of barbell training so that we can all get off the toilet at age 90. A noble effort, I would say. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Let me give a quick shout out to everyone in the chat room before we start the discussion here. David, it's good to see you. Wes, thank you guys for joining us. Let's see. And my own wifey. Hey, baby. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about nutrition and fitness. So let's start with nutrition if we can. What are some of the best practices that either of you are aware of? Let's start with Jenni. What are some best practices with nutrition, you think?
I think starting with small changes really works best for people. Pick something. Switch out the soda for water. Do it for about 4 weeks. Stick with it for a couple of weeks, and it'll become an ingrained habit. And I think no matter what direction you go diet-wise, small changes is something that seems to work across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that it's easy to say if you're, do you think it's easy for everyone to switch from soda to water? I mean, that is a huge...
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah, no, that may not be your small change. Everybody's got to pick that thing that you have to start that journey with at least one step. Mm-hmm. So pick what you can handle as a first step. But also it helps to pick something that will have a little bit of an impact, because when you see the impact from what you've done, it becomes easier to do the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Jessie, do you think, what are some sort of first steps when it comes to nutrition for you?
Well, the thing about discussing nutrition in general is it's like politics and religion. So people have very strong opinions about diet and nutrition and exercise, and so it's like anybody who has enough of an interest to watch this episode is probably already got their mindset and is either going to agree with us and take us as confirmation bias that they're right because we're saying the same things they would have said, or they're going to think we're idiots and we don't know what we're talking about because they think of something else. So I actually, as a sort of a first step, I would say keep that in mind, is everybody has very strong opinions. I don't know why, but everybody has very strong opinions on this. So the first person you hear who says do this or do that, listen to it, maybe try it, see if it works for you, but you're going to find somebody else who's going to say something different. And it's not that there isn't a right or wrong. I'm not saying it's all, make up what you want to believe, but do be very careful about buying into something if it doesn't seem to be working for you.
I think that's interesting, because this seems to, we have, of human civilization, we have 12,000 years that is in the historical record. Why is it that we are incapable of having, as a species, having an understanding, like a solid 100% fact-based understanding that this is good for us and this isn't good for us? Like, you have people with gluten allergies that then influences everything in the zeitgeist of our culture saying, well, everyone has to now stay away from gluten. Peanut allergies, now everyone has to stay away from peanuts. Those are just allergies, but then there's just general consensus ideas. Butter used to be really good for you, then it was really bad for you, then it's really good for you again. Eggs, really good, really bad, really good. And it all depends on who you talk to. How, with a span of conscious thinking and living in tribes, can we as a species not understand the basics of nutrition? Where does that come from?
I can give you an answer to that. You're not going to like it though, because the thing of it is the best foods in the world to eat are the ones we like to eat the least. They're the leafy greens. You know, it's broccoli, it's kale, it's stuff that people don't like to eat. You know, if you're arguing about butter, some people really like butter, so they want somebody to tell them butter is great. They want somebody to tell them eggs are great. Nobody needs anybody to tell you kale is great.
I do, because I refuse to believe. Kale. Yeah, I think it's absurd. It seems... Okay, here's this. I know that we are, as a species, superficial and we are extremely good at lying to ourselves, but doesn't it seem like it's something about nutrition, something that is literally going to ensure that you live your maximum potential of life? Why would we convince ourselves of falsehoods in that arena? What do you think, Jenni?
Well, I think people have a lot of emotional attachments to food. And when you have those emotional attachments, it's very easy to just simply justify it and confirmation bias yourself into believing that, yeah, that butter is going to be awesome for you, you know. And that's a really strong thing. People underestimate how strong that is, and those associations, and especially childhood associations with food. I think people really underestimate how strong that is. And you got to remember too, we've had all this time to evolve and eat a certain way, but we haven't had a lot of time to figure out what makes us fat, because it's very recent that we've gotten into a position where there's a Krispy Kreme on every corner and people can be fat. So, you know, there was a time where that thing in your brain that drives you to find and seek out fats and sugars, that's what kept you alive. It's very recent that has become the thing that will kill you. And I don't think our brain has quite adjusted. And I think Jessie's completely right. People want to hear good news about their bad habits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, to go to Jenni's point, if you look at pictures from like the 1930s, 1940s, really, you don't even have to go back that far. You don't see fat people, or they're very few and far between. And it's not that people have changed. People are the same as they've always been. It's that the environment, what is available to eat, has changed so much.
How much do you think... Okay, so there's a couple points I want to hit on here. So I want to put a tack in the idea of ECI in relation to food. I was doing another show about Star Wars, and someone brought up the idea of video games being like a VCI, ECI being erotic crystallization inertia, a concept that, as far as I understand, was originated with Anton LaVey. I want to apply that to food here in just a second. But before I do that, I want to talk about this really great train of thought that you're both talking about here. How much does fashion in the day, the body type celebration of the day, come into nutrition? Because if you look at the Renaissance era, larger body types were the desirable body type. So it was something that you strived for. In order to get that, of course, you would have to consume more food, and traditionally only more wealthy individuals could afford to have that luxury. But do either of you think body type has an influence on nutritional information, or is that just a surface thing?
I think I don't think body type has that much to do with it. I mean, we're all shaped different. I'm not denying that, but I think I'm very fascinated by a lot of the science that's coming out related to the gut microbiome, and how if you eat certain things, it puts different bacteria into your gut that's going to cause you to crave certain things. You know, so like the more vegetables you eat, the more vegetables you will crave. The more sugars you eat, the more sugars you will crave. So you set yourself down a path that's going one way or another more easily. I think that might play much more of a role into it than, say, you know, bone structure, or, you know, whether you tend to have the fatter face or the skinnier face or the taller build or the shorter build. Those things do matter, but I think to a much less degree.
What do you think, Jenni?
Well, I think genetics plays a role in things. I think societal attitudes towards it plays a role in things. In the past, as you point out, you had to be affluent to be bigger, and therefore it was something to be strived for. But I think what's really happened is the wide availability of those foods that used to be confined to the affluent class. What used to be a Sunday dinner is now 3 times a day, every day. So in that aspect, you know, how linked it is, the striving for that, the striving for the ability to have that as a social mechanism. It may play a part, but in the end, you have to have people willing to take that on and do that in their lives. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Yeah. I'm kind of torn on that. I can see where, as a social mechanism, it would, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on that.
You know, when you mentioned that only the affluent could afford it at that time, it's kind of like only the affluent can afford to look like who's that guy that plays Wolverine or whatever, you know, because they can spend 4 hours at a gym, right, or they can get all the surgery to like get the last little bits of fat off their body so they can have the bikini bridge and the thigh gap thing going. You know, most people have a bit too much to do during the day to worry that much about their appearance. So I think, generally speaking, the mass of population is going to look kind of average, I mean, in terms of weight, based on what's available for food.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because there is that, and it's why we're using the connection in the show today. There is an intimate connection between nutrition and fitness. It is interlinked, and there's no way that we can actually separate it because one influences the other in almost every possible way. I'm going to struggle with this idea, trying to get it out properly, and I want to hear what you two have to say about it. And it's something that I see in other ways, in other avenues of life. The idea that as human beings, we are evolving with our time, and we traditionally, in the moment of the change in evolution, we see it as a negative, and I'm going to give some examples here in just a second, but when we reflect back on it, we think, oh, well, that's just, of course, that had to happen. We evolved. So the idea of transportation and evolution, you know, we used to walk everywhere, and I'm sure there's people shaking a stick. You're all going too fast with them mechanical cars and, you know, riding your horses too fast down the street. And then there's information. You know, you used to actually be able to sit down and talk to people to get information. It was spread that way. And then you had the printed press, and I'm sure there was people fighting against the printed word, and it was spreading too fast, and you were taking what were workers in farms and educating them so that they no longer wanted to work in farms and they wanted to learn industry and move into the city. And I'm sure people were shaking a stick at that. And then there's the stopping of properly instructing writing cursive, and the act of writing a letter, and the act of not being on a digital video game at all seconds of the day, or not being tied to your phone at all times. Whatever the technology of evolution is that we as human species continue to develop, there are always us that witness it in that time of change, the internet, the pervasiveness of it, where we say there's something bad on the other side of that we haven't realized yet. But it's only bad because we're standing on this side. It's just going to be the way it is in the next generation. So with the laziness of kids nowadays and the complaint that we are, as a physiological species, getting more sedimentary and just we perceive it as laziness from where we're standing now. In the future, well, that's just going to be how kids are. And that's how they've always been. They've grown up with technology. They live technology their whole lives. They're not even quite human anymore. Now we're part human and part just AI. Is this the same thing with food? If that's an idea that you two can ascribe to, do we see that with food as well? Is our obsession with nutrition and the act of living a long life just the way of humans of the past? And the way of humans in the future is going to be every indulgence, whenever you want it, shorter lifespans, more heart disease, so be it. Anyone want to take that one?
Oh, goodness, I hope not. I hope not. I mean, if you look at the diets in the past, your average peasant diet is what seems to be one of the healthier choices out there. Mm-hmm. So to hear that, and we've long strived to increase lifespan, and more importantly, to increase quality of life. Yeah. And to turn around and go backwards now, I don't want that. I mean, I'm truly an atheist. This is the one life we get. Why would I want it to suck and be shorter?
Hmm. Yeah, what do you think, Jessie?
Well, I think probably global warming is going to factor in here, and there will be shortage of fresh water, there will be shortage of food, there will be shortage of land. So I think that's going to be the environmental triggers. That pretty much changes the whole game.
Yeah, and with just the food and water shortage comes war. There's no way around it. There's just regional conflict that comes up, and it's been in the past and it will in the future. So not only are we going to be tethered to that reality of shortages, but also tethered to the idea of constant war because of it, and then profiteers encouraging it. Well, here's an idea, because there is a movement, and I don't know if it's as fervent now as it was, say, 5 years ago, but there is a movement in order to curtail this idea of food shortages. We would genetically engineer food in order to grow in less than desirable climates to retain the same amount of nutrition in order to feed a greater, vaster population on this planet, regardless of regionally where you live. Does nutrition, as you two see it, is it impacted by GMOs in any way?
Yes, but not necessarily good or bad. I mean, Norm Borlaug, I think, is the champion of having made these kind of changes in the past, and I think I don't know how many tens of thousands of people have avoided starvation because of him. So I'm not going to call it a bad thing, but certainly there are risks. Certainly the science is we're putting things out there before we know the full science behind it, before we know all the risks. And so there are going to be consequences that we can't predict at this point. So it's not blanket good, it's not blanket bad, it's just, it is what it is, because there's too damn many of us right now.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jenni?
My thoughts are very similar. We started genetically modifying crops when we started taking things from the wild versions that we found and making them better and bigger and all the things we wanted them to be. It's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. But if you're not careful with it, you get situations where you have monocrops that become problematic situations. They can't grow other things, or all that crop is killed off. The separate situation of the Indian farmers and the Monsanto situation, where they can't grow the crops that they need to grow without the special pesticides. But to me, all that comes back to things that aren't necessarily GMO. It's a company that's creating a problem. Or in the case of the horrible Red Delicious apple, it's that everybody selected for the wrong thing. Yeah. We have this apple that transports very well, looks good on the shelf, but tastes like crap. that's selecting and modifying things too. So it just depends on, are you going to use it for good or evil?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such an arbitrary decision, you know? I mean,
yeah, and
certainly understand that.
Good to you is, it may be bad to somebody else. I'm sure Monsanto likes that their products are patented and in a situation where you have to use their seed in certain applications. You know, to them that is a good thing. You know,
absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of going back to having variety in crops. I think monocrop is a bad situation. I think the fact that we use most of our land here in America to grow just one or two types of crops to feed the animals, I think is a bad situation. I think we need variety, and that would probably solve 90% of it.
Yeah. Yeah, this to me is at the core of every issue we have moving forward as a society, and that's access to food and access to nutritious food. The more we collectively move into this idea of expediency and everything in the moment, the further away we get from actually making our own dinners. And we're relying on other people to do it. And in order for a corporation to prepare a meal, they need speed, so they need to cut corners. They need to buy in bulk, so they need to not buy the best quality, just good enough of food in order to provide it for such a large mass of consumer, in order to get it out as quickly as possible. Our desire for having everything now and not wanting to wait is, in my opinion, the very thing that's going to shorten our lifespans and degrade us as a species. On the physiological level. I loved what you were talking about, Jessie, when you were talking about the inner biome of your gut, the immense bacteria. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that said there's more bacteria in your stomach than there are stars in the sky, which is an insane thought. And again, I don't know if that's true or not. I just know that I believe he said it. Please, internet, correct me if I'm wrong. But we pretend like our desires, to your point about the sugar craving or fat craving, we pretend like our desires are our own, like our mind is our own, but we are influenced by other living entities that dwell within us. It is not just us. And so we have to be able to take a step back and say, if I'm going to be controlled by these other entities, I need to take control of them, and I need to make them make me crave the things that I know are going to be what perpetuate my life, not necessarily satiate their desire in the moment and then kill me. Because, this is just my opinion, I don't believe that bacteria have higher thought capacities. I can't prove it. I don't know. I'm open to the idea, but I genuinely think outside of maybe some of the higher quality animals out there, everything else is pretty much reaction based as far as life. We are a very rare exception here as human beings. So I think bacteria just sort of consume and crave, and that's it. That influences us, and hence we do it as well. It's kind of a terrifying thought when you break it down. I would like to briefly talk about, there's two other points that I want to bring up in nutrition before we move on to fitness. I want to talk about the ECI idea, and then I want to talk about our individual nutritional guidelines that we follow in order to, just feel better, eat healthier, what we strive for as far as nutrition. But I want to talk about this idea of ECI because, one, it's germane to Satanism, and it's an interesting idea to me. ECI was sort of a no-duh concept once I read it, and it's the idea that you experience a moment in your life that then imprints you further down the line in life. So for me, the idea of a garter belt or a stocking that is slowly revealed or accidentally revealed is a massive erotic turn on to me. It is something that I saw as a kid in some World War II movie, and from that moment, I have been affected by it, and I will forever strive to see it again or get excited when I see it again. You were both mentioning earlier about the idea of food being the same way. Jenni, you were mentioning about the emotional relationship of food. And though we all understand this concept, I don't know that we take it to the extreme that maybe we should, because once we understand it in the extreme, we will truly understand the impact that it has on our decision making. So the idea of comfort food, Southern comfort food alone, is greasy, fried, horrible for your heart food, and yet it's something that everyone innately, okay, yeah, there's always going to be variations here, but most people just crave and love the idea of. So what do you guys think? Is there a F for food, FCI, where you experience this one thing as a kid and it will forever dominate your future, to pull in a Star Wars reference? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there is. Especially if it was your mother or grandmother and that thing is associated with family gatherings and good times. Yes, I really do. I think inherently food is an emotional thing for people on some level, even if they have negative associations with it. And I've seen people that have the other direction. They cannot get their disordered eating together because they have negative associations with food. But yes, I think it weighs more heavily on people than we all realize.
Jessie, what do you think about the idea of negative associations with food? I know you don't have any children, but you have nieces and nephews, right?
Yeah,
is there a downside of pressuring kids to, you must eat your vegetables, and then they get this negative association with that food and then carry it throughout life?
I don't, I can't answer the question that way because I don't know my nieces and nephews well enough to answer it that way. I can answer it from my own perspective, though. I never would have considered ECI with food until you mentioned it. But now that you did mention it, I'm thinking you might be onto something here, because growing up, I always hated my mother's cooking. It was awful. She's a terrible cook. I'm sorry, Ma. Sorry, but you are. And so I never ate a lot. I never, you'd eat as much as you had to be excused from the table, and that was it. And so, people now hate me in life because I'm always been on the skinny side, but I don't have an association of food with pleasure. I mean, I can like the taste of something, but I never eat for comfort. So you might be onto something there. I don't know.
Wow. Nothing is just like, oh yeah, I need to have this at this moment because I'm kind of down, or.
I know. I mean, no, not ever like that.
Holy
I mean,
shit.
Yeah, I mean, tonight I had pizza and I'm drinking beer. Here I am doing a podcast on fitness, nutrition, and drinking beer. I don't care. But it's not like I had beer and pizza thinking, oh, this is a craving, and I've been dying all week for Saturday nights because Saturday nights is always beer and pizza night.
Right.
It's just, yeah, it tastes good. I like it. Okay, done.
All right. Well, way to shit on my point.
No, I think I'm making your point because I
because
don't
of
think
the
I ever.
no real experience. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy because I can distinctly remember, when my sisters and the family was out doing their things, and it could just be like me and my mom and have like a mother-son sort of evening. She would turn on Dallas. I don't know if you guys remember that TV show. She would turn on Dallas, and then she would get butter pecan ice cream and pecan sandies cookies, which is just shortbread cookies with pecans in them. And that was sort of like our mother-son date thing that we did. We'd watch Dallas and eat that, and I would color in a coloring book. I have such an emotional connection with those two things, that ice cream and that cookie, that I can't help but think, if I'm going to be spending time with my daughter or my son, let's get some of that. Let's get some ice cream and cookie, because I have an emotional connection to it. It's just something that I felt so good with it. I want my kids to have the same feeling that I felt, so I'm going to force them to consume this really garbage food as well. So it's just crazy how that works.
Yeah, and you really should put away the coloring books at this point as well. I mean, you're a little old for that.
Never, and you can't make me. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about our individual approaches to nutrition, what we eat, why we eat it type information. But leading into that, Jessie, you had mentioned beer and pizza. I want to address this before we dive into that, because it's going to lead us perfectly into fitness. And that's the idea that eating somehow is a detriment to losing weight. Like if you eat, or if you drink beer, for example, high calorie drink, it's made of wheat and hops primarily, and yeast, of course, that this is somehow a bad thing. But if you actually want to build muscle, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, you have to eat. Like, you literally have to eat food, and you have to eat high-calorie food. So where did this separation, this idea of dieting, come from, that you must starve yourself in order to lose weight, when really, if you wanted to lose weight, you would just eat and exercise? What do you think, Jenni?
I think people take the math and extrapolate it way too far. Everybody says it's all about calories in, calories out. It's just a math problem. As long as you're taking in fewer calories than you're using during the day, you're fine. And the problem is it is not that simple. It may be that simple on Bunsen burners in a lab, but your body is not a Bunsen burner in a lab. And what goes on under the circumstances that you're in during your day can be very different from what somebody that they studied in a study was doing. And I think it gets oversimplified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really do. I think it gets oversimplified to the point that you have people that are legitimately under medical supervision usually, but they're doing 500 calorie a day diets, 800 calories a day.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jessie?
Yeah, I mean, there's the societal standards, and if you stray outside them for any reason, people will come down on you. And so if you stray outside them for a weight, it's an unpleasant feeling. So now you've put yourself in a social situation that feels unpleasant to you. I think there's part of us wants to punish ourselves for letting ourselves get into a situation that now feels unpleasant. So we punish ourselves by not just cutting back to what's reasonable, but cutting back to where it hurts a little, and I think it's very human to do that. It's not good to do that, obviously, but it's very human to do that. So if you see yourself doing that, don't beat yourself up for doing that, because that's just punishing yourself further. Just back off. Just love yourself and get on with life.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm trying to see what people are saying in the chat room, but it's like a freaking essay, so I can't read it all. What do you? Let's start with personal best practices. So when you think of you as Jessie, what are you going to eat that you should eat because you feel like, for some reason or another, it's just the right thing to do? What's your idea of personal nutrition? Besides beer and pizza.
Yeah, well, other than that, of course. I tell you, a while back, like 10, 15 years ago, I tried out this diet called caloric restriction with optimal nutrition is the full name of it. It was a longevity diet. So the basic idea was, they know that certain animals, the less they eat during their lifetime, the longer their lifespan. So the idea was extend your lifespan by eating less. I liked the idea. The way you do the diet is you have to log everything you eat, and I mean like weigh everything. Get one of those drug dealer scales and actually weigh it down to the very gram.
She's not lying.
And then they have this database online of I think it's nutritiondata.self.com. And it's got like all kinds of food and all kinds of, it doesn't have everything in the world on it, but you'd be amazed at how much information is in there. And I'm very much a data junkie. I absolutely love databases. I love working with numbers. I love playing around with this kind of stuff. So this was like the diet for me, because this was a toy. This was a game for me more than it was a diet. I did it for probably about 2 years. I remember losing like 15 pounds within 6 months without ever being hungry. I was not doing it to lose weight. It was just when you eat, when you're focusing on nutritionally dense foods, they're full of fiber, so you fill up faster. So you don't eat as much. And doing that and experimenting with, learning that, okay, if you cook foods with vitamin C, you lose the vitamin C unless it's bok choy, which doesn't lose vitamin C when it's cooked, little things like that. You learn a lot of tricks on how to eat certain foods and what foods are better than others. So like you learn, they always say bananas are high in potassium. Bananas are not high in potassium. Bananas are pretty much, they're a lot of sugar. It's a lot of empty calories. They're not good for you. You want potassium, eat spinach or drink coffee or drink tea. That stuff's high in potassium. So it's actually calorie for calorie. Tea is the best source of potassium out there. It's just if you drink a lot of it, you're drinking a lot of water, so you're flushing stuff out of your system too. So it's a lot of things to play around with, and I learned a lot from that. So when I make my breakfast and lunch, I eat for nutrition, and then dinner I eat with my husband. It's more social. So that's kind of how I break up my day. So I eat a lot of leafy greens. I eat a lot of vegetables in general. I will throw some stuff into it to make it taste a little bit better, but for the most part, I'm not paying attention to what I'm eating for breakfast and lunch, so I just go not quite vegan, but close.
Interesting. So do you think, so it's not a conscious decision to not eat meat, it's just from what you crave from your typical patterns in life, you just don't eat a lot of meat, is that it?
Yeah, because we eat a lot of meat for dinner, and I do put some meat into my breakfast and lunch. I'm not anywhere close to being a vegetarian, but if most people's lunch was, 2 pieces of bread and some meat and maybe like some lettuce in there, and they're saying, okay, I got a vegetable because I've got some lettuce in my sandwich. Mine would be kale and spinach and red cabbage and maybe some carrots and maybe some green bell peppers, and then I'll throw a little chicken from the previous night's dinner on top. So there's meat in there, but it's a much lower proportion to what I've got for vegetables.
Yeah. Nice. What do you think, Jenny? What's your... Oh, wait, hold on. Before we do that, I'm sorry. You had made a note earlier on about intermittent fasting. Can we talk about that really quick? I'm not familiar.
Yeah, there's 2 ways that people are doing it, well, okay, so the 2 ways that you can do it is like one day you eat normal, and then the next day you eat like 500 calories, and the next day you eat normal, and just alternate. The other way, which I have more of an interest in, is time-restricted feeding, where you just try to close the gap from the first non-water thing you consume to the last non-water thing you consume. I have a hell of a time doing that. For me to get it even into 12 hours is very difficult, but you're supposed to get it to like 8 hours to really see the benefit. And what makes this an interesting idea to me, and some people are doing it to lose weight, I'm not interested in it for that. What I find interesting is when you're in the fasted state, it changes a whole lot about what's going on in your body, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak about this, but it's something that you can Google if you're interested. But it allows your body to flush out a lot of toxins that it wouldn't otherwise get to do. It's kind of like if you get a good night's sleep. If you're really good about getting a good night's sleep, your sleep cycle is flushing toxins from your brain. So a fasting period flushes toxins from your body. So it's definitely something worth looking into.
Interesting. Okay, so Jenny, best practices, nutrition. What do you think?
I aim for plant-based whole foods. I don't know how much simpler you can get. Plant-based whole foods. People say vegan, but in the end, chips, french fries, candy, those things are all vegan. They're not going to help you nutritional wise. They're not going to help you build muscle if that's your goal. They're not going to help you lose weight if that's your goal. They're not going to help you be healthy in your old age if that's your goal. So stick to whole foods. Especially, one thing I like to tell people, if your great-grandmother would have recognized it as a food substance, you're probably good to go with it.
See, that's I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
really quick. That's interesting because there's a whole movement of people who are saying like pasta is really bad for you. Eat as much bacon as you want, but having bread and pasta is a terrible notion. But your great grandmother would have been like, yeah, have some pasta. It's pasta, of course.
Exactly.
So there's a constant evolution of misunderstanding versus understanding versus anecdotal short gain benefits versus long term. I mean, how do you reconcile that for your eating?
Well, when I started this whole thing, I had been lectured to by numerous people about low carb. Back in the day, it was Atkins. When I was younger, it was Sugar Busters. These days, people call it keto or paleo. And everybody said that was the way to go. And I did it faithfully. I kept for about 6 months. I kept under about 50 carbs a day, 50 grams of carbs a day. And I sort of became my own little chemistry experiment. I measured everything. She is not kidding about those drug dealer scales. I probably have 3 different sets for, the various levels, if you're measuring a pound of potatoes versus, a few grams of some spice that goes in. I wrote everything down. I probably have a stack of journals pretty high. Wow. And I just took notes for a while. And to be honest, the whole low carb thing, the keto diet, it did take a few pounds off. It took about the first 30 or 40 pounds off. But it was not something that for me I could maintain for a number of reasons. For one, I felt like crap. I was tired. For me, I was tired. I had digestive issues with it. I was uncomfortable digestively. We'll leave that to you to determine what you'd like that to mean. And I had heard other people have the same problems with it, so I knew this was part of it. And so I started just reading studies. I got on PubMed. I got on the National Institute Journal of whoever I could find, and I read day in and day out for a few months and tried things and kept notes and took measurements of food. And what I landed on was that whole food plant-based was easier. It did the job. I was full without going over a calorie limit, which at that time I was still counting calories. It was affordable. It was something I didn't have the digestive issues on. And for me, it works. Now, based on the studies that I read, all the conglomeration of everything that I read, what seems to be the problem is you have a lot of recommendations, be it from the government or from the American Heart Association or whoever, that wants you to have about a balance, a 30-30-30 balance. 30% carbs, 30% fats, or 33, pardon, 30% protein. And what seems to work, according to the studies, is to pick an end. If you're one of the people that can do the really high fat, like 80% fat, very low carb diets, then that seems to, study-wise, have some good results. If you can go the other end and do what I'm doing, where you have about a 10% or less fat intake and a very high carb intake, that seems to work for people, at least on paper, at least in the studies. It seems to be healthy for people. The problem is people have this concept of moderation is the best thing. Moderation in all things. And this is one particular area, at least based on the research we have so far, it seems like moderation is not the way to go. And if you look at most societies before we started getting the McDonald's and the KFC and all the availability of things that we have now, you have societies like the Eskimo or Inuit people who were very high fat, very low carb, and seem to have good numbers, seem to have a good history of not having too much heart disease and whatnot, diabetes. And then you had people that were very focused on plant foods and potatoes or whatever the primary staple crop was, and had very little meat. such as the Chinese people. And it just seems to be backed up in the studies we have so far. But I don't think even the people that study it are really happy with the studies we have so far. I think everyone still has questions. So that's what I came away with. Mm-hmm. And like I say, the whole foods plant-based is just on that spectrum. That's what worked for me. Mm-hmm. And that's what fits in with my lifestyle and what my body can handle, and also what I believe in. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because I think the idea of belief in doing what you believe, the habits that you have in consuming food and what foods are right is the most important thing. And of course, that is going to be hopefully informed by study, as you have. But often it's just going to be by culture and by the society that you were raised in. And so not many people are actually going to look into it. They're just going to think, well, this is what we eat. This is how we live. One thing that I find so interesting when it comes to nutrition and foods that are good for you versus bad for you is we take the food part into account, but we don't often take the lifestyle part into account. Meaning, if you live, for example, in Inuit culture, you need fat on your body because you're living in a goddamned ice cube. Like, your life is in an ice cube. So you have to have fat deposits in order to maintain core body temperatures. You have to have a high meat, fat-based diet. You have to. And, coincidentally, it's the only thing you can have in living that space. I can't speak to Asian cultures, but they are incredibly dense with noodles, starches, and vegetables. The lifestyle, I think, has a part to do with that. So when we reflect on historic norms of consumption of food, if you look at the paleo diet, for example, which is super popular in like CrossFit, realms and stuff, we seem to forget the reality behind the lifestyle behind the consumption. We ate a lot of raw foods because as in this paleo era, because we couldn't fucking properly cook, because we didn't have choice. We didn't have an option. We had to eat meat, raw, like cooked chunks of meat, because that is all we had as an option. Our lifestyle demanded it because we were scavengers at that point, historically. When you move into more of a civilization-based environment, agriculture is a huge part of that. So you have teams of people cultivating crops in order to feed the society. You have teams of people herding animals in order to feed the society. And so you had a little bit more of a balanced diet than you did back when you had to hide from fucking monsters and the moon. So, little things like that. It just infuriates me. We never really take into account the lifestyle of the people that we're trying to emulate the diet of, nor the average lifespan. We're trying to live longer, not shorter. Like, the paleo era man was like a 22-year-old lifespan. I mean, if that's what you want, good on you, but, I choose life. Like, I want to live longer. Okay, so, stupid rant, sorry. The way I look at it is, you're going to hate this, Jenny. Everything in moderation. I do my damnedest to eat more fruits and vegetables, more vegetables actually, than anything else. So my ideal meal in sort of, the afternoon or the evening is going to be a large portion of mixed vegetables, a smaller portion of some sort of side, whether it's noodles or whether it's rice, something like that, or potatoes or something like that. And then a smaller portion of a meat, whether it's a fish or a chicken or a pig or a cow, something like that, where it's a graded thing. And then I'm always going to have even a smaller portion of that of a straight up grain, be it a bread or a roll or something like that. Drinks, I never drink soda. I very, very, very rarely drink any type of fruit, juice or anything like that. I'm straight up water first, coffee second, and beer/wine/liquor third. So it's very straightforward to me. I've never understood the idea of, even though, at times I find myself victim of it, of having just a gigantic steak and that's it as like a meal. That makes no sense to me. Not just from like the desire to have a tasty slab of beef side of it, but just the side of that's not a meal. Like that's a heart attack. Like you have to understand what you're doing. It just doesn't make sense to me. I like to have a regular bathroom visit. You know, I don't want to be all built up. So I just know that if all I ate was steak, I would be fucked as far as, you know, regularity. So what do you guys think about that? The nutrition on the side of lifestyle. If we are living a more sedimentary lifestyle, we are not active, we're not out on the farm as a culture, by and large. We are all very much, by and large, again, sitting behind a desk, as we are right now, performing our daily activities. We're not out, we're not active. So the types of food that we eat, is it more important that we pay attention to now and try to cater to our current lifestyle rather than looking back at our ancestors and seeing what they ate? Because they had a more active lifestyle than we did. So what do you think?
I think, yeah, I see where you're going with it. You may be onto something, but I suspect it's more that our ancestors just ate what was available. And unfortunately, we're doing the same thing with a Krispy Kreme on every corner. I think that we've got much more data available to us if we take the time to look for it, to know what's good to eat now than our ancestors. Obviously, they had, you know, what did Grandpa tell us to eat? Well, he's still alive. I guess we can eat that. In terms of our activity day to day, again, it's kind of like our ancestors. They were moving because they had to move. And we are sitting because we have to sit because that's what we get paid to do, you know? I don't want to be sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day. I don't want to be sitting in my car driving 45 minutes to get to the desk so I can sit there 8 hours a day. But that's what I'm paid to do for the moment. So it's we're in the same boat as our ancestors. Really, we are. The difference is we've got information they don't have, and we should be using that to our advantage.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Did you have any other thoughts on that, Jenni?
No, I pretty much agree with that, I have to say. I mean, because to a certain extent, yeah, we're like they are. We have only a certain amount of choices available to us, but we do have more information, and we should be applying it. I don't know. I sort of think back to the 7 deadly sins. That's always sort of guided me a little bit. And at some point, you know, the human body, we're in this world. At some point, I feel like there should be kind of a striving of getting out in the world and using the body for the things that it was meant to. Mm-hmm. You know, at some point, yeah, there's sloth. Yeah, you want to nap all weekend. But at some point, you have to go, oh, fuck it, and get up and go on a mile or go jump in the swimming pool. You know, one thing kind of puts an end to the next thing so that you're balanced and you don't get too much of a good thing. You know, you can have all the good things, but they can be balanced. And I think we've sort of lost that balance. And I think it's a good idea to, yes, realize that we're in modern society and we're stuck behind a desk. And yeah, that is our current situation. And we do need to deal with that. But we're also meant to be out there doing things. Mm-hmm. And we need to remember that too and get out there and do more things. And I don't care if gardening is your thing or swimming is your thing or just tiptoeing through the tulips is your thing. Get out there, go do it, interact with the real world.
Yeah. David here in the chat room is saying he bikes 15 minutes to work, cleans rooms for laboratories for about 10 hours, and then bikes home. I think that's great. If you have the option of biking to and from work, and I think the majority of us do. Like in Jessie, in my case, if you're driving 45 minutes, biking's not an option. It would be like a 2-hour freaking bike, and that's just not realistic. Then do it if that's an option. I think ultimately I like to think, and this is going to lead us into fitness, and we've been going for an hour already, and we haven't even talked about the second half of our discussion. So if you two are comfortable with hanging in there, I'd appreciate it. We always have to remember that we are creatures of energy, right? Like the universe exists to distribute energy. Like that is all life is. You never lose energy. It just changes form. It moves from one to the next, one state to the next state. It's an interesting idea. And if you think of the chemical makeup of existence, of our physiology, you think of the idea of fat, and it's just stored energy. That's literally all it is. It's potential so that we can use it. And if you're building muscle, then muscle reaches to your fat stores and takes that energy away to then build the muscle. If you need to be active in life, you have to consume calories, which are energy, in order to then burn that energy in order to be active. It's all just this transference of this idea of energy, which is strange. And again, when you think of it in terms of like the biome of your gut, you are not so much in control as just a machine completing a task. And we apply logic to it through our daily lives, but that is, as I see it anyway, the reality of it. And so if you're going to want to have a desired physical look, or you're going to want to live a specific lifestyle, I like to always keep the energy side of it in mind. Because again, you're talking about how it's a bit of a simplistic take, Jenni, on calorie in, calorie out. And I don't necessarily take that simplistic of an approach to it, but I do like the abstract idea of, again, fat stored is potential energy. It's not a bad thing. It means that you have the option of using it in other ways. If you're an Inuit, you're going to need fat for warmth to help, and you're going to be burning more energy in order to maintain your core body temperature. It's just the chemical machine that we are. It's going to happen innately, whether you want it to or not. And again, if you run out of fat, then it's going to start burning the actual muscles in your body, and you're going to just wither away to nothing until you die. So it is something that we need, and we need to stop thinking of fat as a bad thing, and just think of it as this is the reality of our lives. We have to have energy. In order to get energy, we have to consume foods. In order to be healthy and continue consuming foods, we have to consume the correct foods, meaning lower sugar, more plants. And I mean, that's overly simplistic, but that's how I like to think about it. I want to move into fitness, and then you guys can yell at me and tell me how wrong I am in just a second. We've got an enlightened perspective from Patrick DeMarco. On the other side of that, let's dive into fitness really quick.
Hi, I'm Patrick DeMarco, and it's time for an enlightened perspective. We're doing one of my favorite topics. A lot of people want to work out, and they want to get into shape, and they want to get fit. When you decide that you want to make that change, and you're adamant about, I'm going to change my life, and you get a gym membership and you want to go, I congratulate you. My hat is off to you, because once you make that decision to change, it's like flipping a switch. You're going to put your attention on yourself, which is the best thing that you can do. When you start to work out and you go to the gym, you're kind of looking around like, what do I do here? Because there's a lot of machines and a lot of really buff dudes. And my suggestion would be to get a certified trainer. Look at all the trainers. Make sure you find the right one. There's a lot of theories about working out. A lot of people think for you to get fit, you need to lift weights, and that's an absolute farce. Let's look at our military, or militaries across the board. They do 3 things: pull-ups, sit-ups, and push-ups, and they run. So maybe 4 things. That's it. And those guys are in the greatest shape of their life. They're in fighting condition. They do a lot of calisthenics. I probably average about 300 to 500 push-ups a day throughout the day. I notice that things change, and I'm not lifting any weights, and I'm getting pretty ripped. So it all depends on what aesthetic that you're going for. There's a lot of theories about you have to lift weights. That's not necessarily true. Look at the hottest selling workout tape is Insanity. There's 0 weights in that. Or you can go to PX90 where there is some weights. It just all depends on what you want to do. So let's break down into my story. I was overweight. I was building a business. So working out kind of fell at the wayside while I was trying to build everything. So at my heaviest, I was probably pushing 240. Right now I'm weighing 190. So I lost about 50 pounds and I put on about 15 pounds of muscle. Which when I started, I couldn't even do 1 pull-up. Now I'm doing 4 one-arm pull-ups per arm. So it all depends. When I started, I did an hour and a half on the treadmill. I did push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. And then I worked punching the bag as I have experience in boxing. I've been an amateur boxer for a couple of years. So when I wanted to get back into it, I started from ground zero. And I couldn't work out every day, but I'd work out every other day. And I would push myself as hard as I could go. Nutrition is important too. If you want to see dramatic change, stop eating garbage. That's number 1. Don't eat fast food. Don't eat fried foods. Eat vegetables, eat fruit, eat meat. If you don't want to eat meat, go vegan. That's good. Stay away from sugar. You can eat good sugar, like strawberries and things like that. But sodas, fuck that shit. Anything sugary drinks, no. Fruit juice, people say no, but I think fruit juice is good. I think fruit juices are good for you. I'm a big fan of soda, and I can't drink soda. I make the choice not to drink soda. So I mix cranberry juice and club soda, and that gives me my soda fix. But the discipline of what you're doing is so important. Now, when you start working out and you get to a point where you want to have an aesthetic, you want to have a way that you look, pick your aesthetic. Like you want to look like Harry Cavill from Superman, or you want to look like, I don't know, Robert Downey or Ant-Man. You want to be lean, but you don't want to be too big. Look at that and bring that to your trainer and say, this is the aesthetic that I want. And if he's a good trainer, then he'll be able to sculpt and mold your body into those things. But if you're 5'2", and you want to look like Harry Cavill, that's not going to happen. If you're 5'2", you're going to look like Glenn Danzig or Franco Colombo. You're not going to look like that. That's just not going to happen. Make sure you do your body type. If you're super like skinny and you want to look like Harry Cavill, you're going to need to eat a lot of fucking food. I'm talking 5,000 calories a day to feel that. But Harry Cavill worked out 3 to 4 hours a day for 6 months. So think about how much, you're not paid Harry Cavill salary money to work out like that, but you can work out at, your own pace. So you can achieve those goals. It just takes time, and you have to be dedicated, and you have to have the discipline. For me, it's more of a lifestyle. I just want to say that when people work out, like you get cut or you get hurt, you can watch your body heal. And that's an important thing. Now, when you get hurt in your mind or your soul or your heart, you have to start, you don't really see yourself heal. So you don't see yourself getting better. So if you start working out, now all of a sudden you look better, you feel better, you don't have all that excess weight, your diet's changed. Work out safe, that's another thing. You don't have to be the guy that has to put up 4 plates every time you go in there. Work out smart. Don't get hurt. Because you get hurt, then you're not going to work out again. And who are you showing off for? Nobody. Because nobody gives a fuck in the gym. They're there to work. If you were there to be, if you go to the gym and you have a smoothie and you do 10 minutes on the treadmill and you're chatting with the girls, you're not really going to see results. So you have to be dedicated and stick to your plan and stick to those things. But that's kind of my experience. And I tell you what, as soon as I dropped like 30 pounds, like my whole attitude just changed. I became a different person. I found out that I was getting hit on a lot more by girls and guys, which I'm flattered. I also found that people treat you differently. I also found that I was brighter, I was happier, I was, pushing out endorphins. I look better at 40 than I did at 30. I look better at 40 than I did at 20. So it all depends. It becomes a lifestyle. But for those that are just starting out and want some tips or advice, feel free to message me on Facebook or whatever. You can find me. If you can go there in the mind, you can do anything. So if you visualize yourself looking a certain way and you work at it and keep doing it, you're going to get it. And that's a success that's going to carry with you through your entire life, because working out is the first step in setting goals. And once you reach those goals, then you can set other goals. So for all you out there that are listening to this, I congratulate you on trying to make the change. I congratulate you on your journey. And the more you put in, the more you get out, like anything. And that's an enlightened perspective.
All right, so there's a lot of different topics. Some of them were in line with what we've discussed, and some of them not so much. So we're starting to talk about fitness, and he was saying and bringing up military training as an example that you don't need weights in order to build muscle or to train. Do either of you have an opinion on that? Jenni.
Yeah. Look, I love the military people. And a lot of them are finding out that the barbell training programs really do help them get through their PT and PFT programs easier. Lieutenant Colonel Mac Wood has an article over on the Starting Strength website that actually addresses this in depth. And one of his points that I really liked was that, you know, all of the DOD runs on orders, and the physical fitness part is no different. And those orders were set down in 2002, and they don't really address military readiness, combat effectiveness. They're sort of a holdover from a previous time. And hopefully, if you have enough soldiers that are working the progressive resistance programs, eventually that will filter back up the chain and things will be addressed and it will be different. But I think and if you go over to, hopefully at some point the viewers will get a link for this, but if you go over to the Starting Strength website, you can read a number of the military people who have done the Starting Strength program, which is a barbell progressive resistance training program. And you can read about their results, because in the end, whether you're trying to run a mile really quickly or tote your buddy off the battlefield, it's the strong guy that's going to get it done. And if you're not progressive resistance training, you're leaving a lot of strength on the table. And, you know, they have it. His implication, my understanding of the video, his implication is the best way to train for those tests that include things like pull-ups and push-ups and running is to do pull-ups and push-ups and running. And what I'm basically saying is that, no, the best way to train for that is also to do barbell progressive resistance training. The best way to train for any of it is to do barbell progressive resistance training, and then your practice for whatever sport or whatever you're doing, and that will get you strong enough, and it will decrease the amount of time that it takes you to run that length. It will decrease the amount of energy you expend doing those sit-ups or doing those pull-ups that the military requires you to do. So with all due respect to him and his awesome accomplishments, because he really, you know, look at the pictures of the guy. He's done well. Yeah. But I do disagree with him on this point.
Yeah. I come from a military background, and one thing that they had always mentioned when it came to the PT, the physical training that you would do every morning, is that this is meant to maintain. It's not meant to improve.
That's right.
And so you do just enough so that you don't degrade anymore, but you don't actually intensify. So if you're already a healthy person and you're already a fit and active lifestyle, as a soldier, you're not going to get worse by doing PT. You're just going to stay where you are, which is absolutely, if that's all you want, then that's absolutely fine. If you want to improve, that's why we had gyms. And we did have soldiers that would go in and lift and work out, and they would excel at virtually every other physical
They got better
experience.
numbers on their PT, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And you hit on one thing there. You know, one of the biggest problems that people like me that are trying to get this message out there are the exact group that the military guys are, which is also the group that the D1 athletes are, which are young men who are already naturally gifted in this particular activity. And you can give them anything to do and it's going to look good. They're going to look good doing it. And it's the same with complete novices. You know, to me, this is why trainers make so much money, especially off of new gym members, because novices are a group where anything you give them to do, it's going to have some effect, at least for a short period of time. And people look at what the military is doing, or they look at what D1 athletes are doing, and they want to apply it to what they're going into the gym and do. And that's cause I've had to straighten out more misinformation from people taking that and trying to apply it, I think, than anything else.
Jessie, do you have an opinion on weight training versus using your own body weight as training? You know, running, push-ups, sit-ups, etc.
You can do a lot with body weight. I mean, say for example that your thing was to throw a barbell on your shoulders and do squats with it, right? Well, if you're squatting twice your body weight, that's the same as having no barbell and doing a single leg squat. You know, so you can get very far especially if you're a novice starting out, you can get very far just doing body weight before you even get into the barbell. One of the advantages of the barbell, though, that Jenny didn't mention is the fact that you have to engage your core. You have to engage a lot of muscles to control where that bar is. Form is very important when you're doing barbell anything. So it becomes a much more full body workout than you might think. You know, it's not like, you know, doing lifts with a dumbbell or something. You know, it's a lot more full body engaged. So I would say if you're new starting out, absolutely start with body weight, because first off, you don't have to spend any money to start it. You can get rather far before you have to invest any money in it. And then you've got a solid base for your muscles that when you start using the barbell, you're less likely to injure yourself. But I do think a barbell is a great tool to use for strength training.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot, you know, as with everything, as with nutrition, same thing with fitness, our experience is informed by our exposure. So I grew up in the 80s era of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Joe Weider and their methods of strength training, which are, I don't know, seemingly very different than it is for an average individual, where you would need to consume 5,000 to 9,000 calories and stay and work out 2 to 3 times a day at straight weight training in order to get this physique that they have. Of course, they also took steroids and HGH and stuff like that in order to help that muscle develop into that aesthetic that they ended up having. But it was very much what is counter to what you would think if you just asked anyone on the street nowadays. They consumed massive amounts of food, massive, and constantly throughout the day. If anyone pays attention to, like, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and how much he eats, it's unfucking believable in order to maintain his physique. Massive amounts of food, and then they spend hours and hours just lifting weights in order to get to where they are. For the average person, that's not the desired. Even though you think in your head, ooh, I want to look like that guy, well, you don't get paid for it. You don't have time. It's not a realistic goal for you. So I think a lot of when we're talking about fitness, I think we have to center it around realistic end results, goals. And those goals are going to be informed by finance, how much money you have to spend on food, how much time you have to work out, access to gyms or weights or other implements outside of just your own body, or household implements. the generic lifestyle of desire. I think, you know, our eyes are often bigger than our will. So we want to be super strong, but we don't actually want to do what it takes to get super strong and big. We like the look of the magazine cover, but we're not willing to do what it takes. And here's a little secret for all of those people who love those bodies. If you ask those people, in order to get into that shape, they were miserable to do that. And they were just looking like that for that photo shoot or for that movie. And after that, they're back to their normal selves and they don't look like that anymore. So we need to rein in the reality of what a human physique is supposed to look like. And again, this is going to fall back to that other part that I always like talking about, and that's just body type. There's the genetics that come into it. For good or bad, I fall into the trap of doing this. My father told me, you know, whenever you're looking for a girlfriend or something, look at their mom, because that's pretty much going to tell you what they're going to look like at that age. Of course, there's variations and stuff, but the reality is genetics play a large role in where we end up. And you can push, but the more you need to push means the more time you need to invest. And the reality is as human beings, we just don't have that much time. And so we can only push a little bit to change those genetic variants that we just fall into. So what do you guys think about that? The idea of realistic goals versus all of the other factors of time and money and effort. Jessie, let's start with you. Is this something that we need to break ourselves of?
Yeah, you know, the first time I started getting into exercising, the first time I really dove into it was 2 feet, and thought to myself, I'm really going to get in shape this time. I think it was in my early 20s at the time. And somewhere I came across information about how low your body fat had to be before you'd be able to see abs. You know, so they say you get abs in the kitchen and not in the gym, because you have to have very, very low body fat for them to show. You can have very strong abs, but they won't show until your body fat is low. And women's body fat is higher than men's generally. So that's why it's, you know, you don't see many men with a six-pack, but you see even fewer women with a six-pack. And when I saw how low it would have to be, I knew there's no way in hell I would ever want that, because I don't want that life, because that sucks. Because I like, you know, even though I'm not big on, I don't do food for comfort, I still like to eat. Yeah. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying, where the ideal image is just hell to get to. So you don't want to look like that. Don't even take that as an ideal.
Yeah. What do you think, Jenni? The idea of realistic goals for your individual genetics.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm totally behind the idea of letting go of that idea of visible abs. I don't see the point in that for the average person. I know that people that are into the bodybuilding and fitness and physique contest, you're exactly right. That's what they do. They look like that just for competition, and the rest of the season they pretty much do not look like that. They don't do that to themselves all the time. And those people that do that are really driven to do it, and it takes a lot to do it, and you're not going to accidentally turn into that in the gym. You know, but I also think for the majority of people, I think they have settled too low. I think they've accepted too low a bar. I think they think that slugging away on the treadmill for 30 minutes 3 times a week is all there is to it. You know, getting that long, low, slow cardio in where they're reading the magazine or catching up on their Fox noise or, you know, texting the girlfriends. I think they have settled too low, and you can find a spot where it's comfortable for you and still reap a lot of benefits from the situation. I think you can find a spot where it's not too demanding on your schedule, but you're seeing real progress. And I think part of the problem, you have a lot of people that walk into the gym. And I hate to pick on CrossFit people. I love CrossFit people, but bless your hearts, y'all are guilty of this. You have people that walk into the gym and they honestly believe if they don't puke while they're there or leave tired, sweaty, and ready to hit the floor, that they haven't done anything. And that's just not the case. It does not have to be like that. And then you have people that some of it just looks so hard to them. You know, they see the advertisements, things like in the video, he mentioned P90X, and I cringed. Because, you know, you have a lot of, especially when you get on the spectrum of older people and very large people, that they take one look at that and they're like, I could never do that. And they walk away and don't even try. And I think people have they've set the bar low and they've left a lot on the table. And I wish we could change that.
I think that's a realistic approach in that we have to. In my opening monologue, I was talking about how everything is the extreme. You're either Antifa or you're alt-right. When the reality is everyone actually lives in between those two in the political spectrum. It's very rare you meet anyone that's hardcore on those fringes. It's the same thing with fitness, in my personal opinion. I totally just spit at the camera. Sorry. Wipe it off. In that you can't, if you haven't lived an active lifestyle and you're looking to get and be more fit and to exercise in some manner, you can't look at the extreme and say, well, I can't do that, and so I'm just not going to try. It's everything in life is baby steps if it's new to you. So take the baby step. So even if it means you're starting on walks, and then you're starting on runs, then you're starting hitting the gym with just your body weight, and then you're moving to dumbbells and barbells. You start easy at a comfortable level. Hopefully, if you are not capable of motivating yourself to push yourself a little harder, then you have someone there with you that is going to help you push yourself. I want to talk about that too, the mental side of it, briefly. Let's put a tack in that. In order to then get you to the next step. But again, to your point, Jenny, I think people just don't try hard enough. They want to do the very minimum in order to reap the greatest rewards, and nothing in life works that way. So why would we ever think that it does? Nothing works that way. If you want great rewards, you have to put in massive amounts of energy in order to earn them. Like, you're just not given things. There's no participation award in physical fitness. Like, you're either doing it and seeing the results, or you're not. So you have to start small, start reasonable, start with your body type, and just realize that as long as you're eating what you know for a goddamn fact you should, fads aside, not so much sugar, not fast food, cook your own foods. That's a great place to start, in my opinion. If you're doing that and you're trying to work out, meaning you're walking or running or jogging and you're lifting actual weights, or you have a routine that you're going through, you will see benefits. And here's something that I think is really interesting too. I had a colleague from my Baltimore office come into town, and they were looking at me and they're like, oh my gosh, are you working out? And, you know, the people in my office were sort of scoffing because they hadn't noticed it. They were exposed to me every single day. They didn't notice any difference. He hadn't seen me for maybe a little over a year, and he noticed immediately that there was a massive difference in my physique. My point of bringing this up is that when you're in the middle of doing it, you don't see the small changes that add up. But they are happening, whether you see them or not. And so you may become discouraged because you're not immediately seeing that six-pack after having done 3 sit-ups. But the reality is your body is getting stronger. You are actively burning more fat. You are actively not necessarily losing weight, because muscle weighs more than fat. And that's something that I think people seemingly don't understand. Stop focusing on your fucking weight. Stop. It's so ridiculous. You're going to be getting benefits if you're doing it. Like, if you're actively doing it. we just have to stop looking at the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. And I was trying to think of some other fitness model, but it's escaping me at the moment. Or the Henry Cavills.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit here too, because I'm coming off of like 3 weeks of a cold here. But you were talking about how you're exercising, but you're not seeing the results day to day. But somebody who sees you a year from now, they'll see the results. So here I am, driving 45 minutes to work. I sit at a desk for 8 hours, actually 9 hours. You count my lunch hour, 45 minutes back. That's a hell of a lot of just sitting on my ass. I went somewhere not too long ago, and I ended up standing around or walking around, but I was on my feet for a good 16 hours. And at the end of the day, I'm like, my back hurts. Why does my back hurt? My back never hurts. I don't have back problems. What the hell is going on? And the person I was walking with is like, oh, you've been on your feet all day. I'm like, what would that have to do with my back? And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, son of a bitch, this is the longest I've been on my feet, and I don't know how long. So kind of going with your point where you're exercising, you're not seeing the changes. If you're not exercising, you're not seeing the changes, but those are happening too. Yeah. And you're losing a step, especially you get older, you're losing a step without even realizing it because your lifestyle doesn't demand that you keep using these muscles, so they start to fade on you. Just wanted to make that point.
No, I think that's great. Jenni, what do you have to say about the idea of active lifestyles versus desiring to see a benefit from it?
I think you have to be realistic in what you're expecting to get out of it and the amount of effort that you're putting into it. I think people expect to put in a little teaspoon of effort and expect to get a lot out of it, and they have to sort of adjust those expectations. And I think continuity of effort matters. Just because you went in and worked out for a couple of weeks in January does not mean you're going to be beach body ready come May. And it's hard, being consistent and doing it day in and out. It is hard. And I think people, they're creatures of habit, so they have that going against them. It's hard to break old habits. And then they're also comfort creatures. They want to be comfortable, and it's hard to mentally go against that. But if you do, the mental benefits and the physical benefits are so great that once it clicks in with you, the changes that are happening, that will sort of encourage you. But you kind of have to grind through it until you get those changes. And that hump is hard for people to get over. It's hard to make it through the plateaus and the parts where you're not getting that instant gratification that people love to get.
It's interesting because you had mentioned in your notes that you wanted to share these ideas so that we could get off the toilet at 90. I went in for a physical, and the doctor, this beautiful black woman, sorry, I obsess about her. Don't tell my wife. Shauna, turn this off. She was telling me, I want you to squat down and then stand up. And so I did it, and she's like, fantastic. You would not be surprised at how many people can't do that. The idea of getting up off of your ass should be... the idea of not being able to do that should be fucking terrifying. It should be such a horrible idea. Oh shit, I think we lost Jessie. That it drives you to want to have some sort of activity level. That you can go on walks when you're 80 and 90. That you can stand up. Like this, and this is a realistic note that needs to be taken. Someone mentioned flexibility and balance as a complement to strength training, but I think it was Jessie, and I'm afraid that she's gone.
Oh no!
I hope she comes back. If not, we'll power through here. But you had mentioned a couple notes about performing the activities the exercises properly, and how like 3 sets of 5 reps is the best rep scheme. Can you speak to that really quick?
Sure. Yeah. Form is dreadfully important. I mean, you not only can hurt yourself,
Welcome back,
but
Jessie.
there she is. Hey, form is dreadfully important. You're not only going to end up hurting yourself, but you're cheating yourself. You're cheating doing the exercise, and you're cheating yourself for what you could get out of it. So form is dreadfully important. Do yourself a favor. You know, get you a book, get on YouTube, get you a trainer, get some source of good form, and make sure that you do good form with every rep. Mm-hmm. Part of that is not pretending like we can't do things we can't really do. And don't go with really high rep schemes. You'll see it in booklets sometimes, you know, up to 20 reps it recommends. Don't do that. It's your form will break down long before that, for women especially. Keep it in, I always tell people when they're starting out, keep it in the 3x5 range, 3 sets of 5 reps each, because 5 is a really good number. It's enough where you can put a little weight on whatever it is you're doing, but it's not so much that your form's going to break down. So 5 is a nice sweet spot. And you'll find programs that say 5x5, 5 sets of 5 reps, or there's another popular program that does a 5-3-1 set where you do 5 on the first set, then 3, and then 1. But you want something in that sweet spot so that your form is not breaking down, so that you can continue to do the exercises properly. Mm. And if you'll start with, you know, Jessie had an excellent point about the compound exercises. If you will start with things that are using your entire body, things like squats, things like deadlifts, and of course with the starting strength program in particular, and a number of other good ones, they throw the bench press in. Bench press too will work your core. If you'll start with these big compound movements and do them correctly, you will get a lot out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not just working the singular muscle, it's working a lot of stability muscles as well.
And that's how we use our body in real life. Yeah. You know, you don't do actions during the day. If you look at machines, take the leg extension, for example, you don't typically do activities during the day where your legs just move in one particular way like that with no other weight on them. Mm-hmm. But you do things in real life. You bend down and pick things up. You do things that look like a squat or a deadlift.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other side of it, is looking at the exercise that you're doing, that you're performing, in relationship to the real-world application. I don't think people do enough. Like, for example, in the fall, I rake a lot of leaves. I literally don't do any exercises in that body motion. And so I started doing some sort of side bends with weight, and that built up the back muscles that I use when I'm raking. I use a lot more of my back than my arms, ironically, when I rake. So you just have to look at the realities of your lifestyle and apply the training exercises that are going to then benefit that lifestyle, I think, in some cases. Jessie, welcome back. You had mentioned in your notes about flexibility and balance as a complement to strength training. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So the balance first, that comes down to, you know, as you get older, you don't want to fall over. That is, you know, your bones become more fragile. If you fall over, that's going to put you out for a much longer time than it would if you fall when you're younger. So, oh, yeah. I mean, if you're probably most of the people watching this are far younger than I am, so it won't matter for them. But I mean, as you get older, balance is much more important. So, okay, that aside, now flexibility, I think, is something that tends to get overlooked a lot. And I know I used to, like, I'd go for hikes, and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to stretch my quads. So I do that thing where you reach behind, like, with your right arm, and you grab your left foot and you just kind of stretch it a bit. And I'd do that for like 10 seconds aside, and I'd say, okay, I stretched my quads, good enough. And it's, you really don't realize the more exercise you do, the more you're tightening the muscle as well. So the better shape you're in terms of being able to lift weights, the more stretching you need to be doing. I knew somebody who, he's a very strong guy, was doing something on a ladder and he slipped and he caught himself with one arm, but his arms were in such a condition where he, normally if he just tried to like reach up, straight up, he couldn't do that because he didn't have that kind of shoulder flexibility anymore. Wow. So when he caught himself with the ladder, he stopped himself from falling, but he seriously injured his shoulder because he basically, the muscles didn't stretch, they tore. So things like that, if you start to lose range of motion because you're building muscle but you're not worrying about the connective tissue, which you need to worry about, you're not worried about stretching the muscle, which you need to, then you're just setting yourself up for injury. You're doing all this work to be healthy, but you're setting yourself up for injury. So,
yeah. I think maybe we should close out the conversation. We're almost at 2 hours, so we need to stop it at some point. But I like that idea of working out to a point where you're actually injuring yourself. And we spoke to this briefly before when we were talking about fitness models or muscle models where they only look like that for that little amount of time, and then the rest of their lives, you know, they're eating much differently and they're exercising much differently, because quite honestly, you're damaging your body when you go to that extreme and to a severe point where they can't do it on a regular basis. And so we must collectively understand that there's a balance that we need to find. There's a balance in the nutritional side of it, and there's a balance in the exercise, the fitness side of it, that is going to be easier for those of us who don't live to work out because we're not getting paid to be on camera or to win a tournament. And so it's much more of a realistic approach. And so if we're focusing on eating right and having an active lifestyle and stop focusing on what other people are doing, or magazine covers, or TV stars, or movie stars, TV stars, and we just judge ourselves on our own merits, using a little bit of peer influence on this peripheral, I think collectively we'd all be in a much better place. And so in the spirit of closing out the discussion, what do you guys think about that? Anyone?
I mean, we're like Jenny said, this is our one life. This is the great indulgence here. You don't want to be laid out with an injury. You don't want to be incapable of getting up and doing something. If an opportunity arises, you want to be able to physically do whatever it is, you know, go take a 3-hour walk or whatever it is. You want to be able to physically do whatever life throws at you. So it's just kind of a day-to-day maintenance of this. I don't even want to call it a shell you live into, because, you know, what your body is and does is so much more of what you're thinking than you might think it is. You need to take care of yourself. I mean, if you want to indulge in life, you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah. If you want to play hard, you have to work hard. You have to live it all to the fullest, you know, and take care of it as best you can, because once you're 90 years old and decrepit and can't get around, it's not going to be any fun. And technology's getting to where we're all living longer. You know, there's no reason for you to not take the steps you need to take to at least maintain what you've got and at least maintain your quality of life. That's what it's all about to me, quality of life.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank both of you for your time and your knowledge and your experience, for coming on and sharing it all. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, Jenny, and Jessie. It's always a pleasure seeing you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Until we can speak of the devil again, or fitness, or nutrition, hail Satan, everyone.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Okay, if you can just sit tight for a minute while I do the outro, I'll let you know when
Sure.
we're out.
Cool.